Ambush. Ambush is a tactic that aims to catch the enemy unprepared by attacking at an unexpected time and place. It is usually applied in areas where the enemy's mobility is limited, such as wooded areas, valleys, or narrow passages. Envelopment. This tactic aims to encircle the enemy from the flanks and squeeze them in the center. The enemy is caught between two fires and his escape routes are blocked. This is usually used when the enemy is outnumbered. Example, at the Battle of Cannae in 216 BC, Hannibal achieved a great victory by flanking the Roman army on both flanks. The Carthaginian troops squeezed the Roman army in the center and completely destroyed it. Attack and retreat. This tactic is a method of deception used to lure the enemy into a trap. An army retreats as if it is being defeated and the enemy follows them. However, when the enemy is trapped, the retreating troops suddenly counterattack. Example, at the Battle of the Kalka River in 1221, the Mongols ambushed and destroyed the Russian and Kipchak armies with a false retreat. Guerrilla Warfare. This tactic is used by small irregular forces against larger organized armies. The enemy is worn down by hit-and-run attacks and kept under constant pressure. This is particularly effective in asymmetric warfare. Example, during the Vietnam War, the Viet Cong guerrillas showed great resistance against US troops using this tactic. Double envelopment. This is a more complex version of the pincer operation. The enemy is surrounded not only from the flanks but also from the rear. In this way, the enemy is completely isolated and destroyed. Example, in 331 BC, Alexander the Great defeated the Persian army at the Battle of Gaugamela using the double encirclement tactic. Lightning operation. Blitzkrieg is a tactic that focuses on winning the war in a short period of time by surprising and catching the enemy unprepared with rapid and intense attacks. This tactic is supported by modern mechanized troops and airstrikes. Example, in World War II, Germany's use of this tactic in its 1939 attack on Poland led to a quick and overwhelming victory. Flanking. This is a tactic that aims to attack the enemy from the flanks, leaving them defenseless. This provides an effective attack by dividing the enemy's attention and lines of defense. Example, Napoleon's victory at the Battle of Marengo by flanking the Austrian forces. Quick attack. This tactic aims to shock the enemy and break their resistance by attacking them suddenly and with overwhelming force. Large-scale bombardments and intense airstrikes are commonly used in this tactic. Example, in the 2003 Iraq War, the US used this tactic with intensive airstrikes against Baghdad. Offensive. Offensive is a tactic that aims to launch a direct attack against the enemy. It is used to target the enemy's weak points, to move the war into the enemy's territory and force it to defend itself. Example, the German offensive against France at the Battle of Verdun during World War I. Defense. Defense is a tactic that aims to hold a position in order to stop or slow an enemy attack. Example, Soviet resistance to German forces at Stalingrad during World War II. Attrition warfare. This tactic aims to gradually deplete the enemy's resources, troops, and morale. The enemy is weakened by constant small skirmishes, encirclements, and harassment attacks. Example, the prolonged trench warfare on the Western Front in World War I. Siege. Siege is a tactic used to surround a city, fortress, or military base in order to force its inhabitants to surrender. The target is usually worn down by starvation or artillery fire. Example, the siege and conquest of Constantinople by the Ottoman Empire in 1453. Turning movement. This tactic aims to encircle the enemy's main forces from the flanks and deprive them of mobility. By closing in behind enemy lines, it forces them to retreat. Example, Napoleon's encirclement of the Austrian army at the Battle of Ulm, forcing it to surrender. Divide and conquer. This tactic aims to divide enemy forces into smaller, more manageable parts. Victory is achieved by destroying the fragmented forces one by one. Example, Julius Caesar's defeat of the tribes one by dividing them in the Gallic Wars. Frontal Battle. Frontal combat involves attacking the enemy directly, along the entire front line. This tactic is often used to surprise and overwhelm the enemy. Example, the direct attack by British and French forces on German positions at the Battle of the Somme in World War I. Penetration. A tactic that aims to penetrate the enemy's defenses, reach the rear lines, and disrupt the enemy's internal lines. This tactic targets the enemy's center. Example: German forces breaking through American lines during the Ardennes offensive in World War II. Hit and run. This tactic involves small groups making sudden attacks on the enemy and retreating rapidly. The aim is to damage the enemy and retreat without suffering major losses. Example: British SAS raids on German convoys during the Desert Wars in North Africa. Artillery barrage, a tactic aimed at destroying or demoralizing enemy positions by intense artillery fire. This is usually done before major attacks. Example: the intense artillery barrage launched by the German army against the French lines at the Battle of Verdun. Night attack. A night attack involves making a sudden attack by taking advantage of the enemy's night vision. This surprises and disadvantages the enemy. Example: George Washington's night attack across the Delaware River against Hessian forces at Trenton in 1776. Kamikaze. The kamikaze tactic aims to inflict great damage by launching suicide attacks on the enemy. It is used for defense, especially late in the war. Example: in World War II, Japanese pilots inflicted great damage by suicide dives on Allied ships. Decoying. Decoying is used to mislead or distract the enemy. Decoy maneuvers, false information, or false targets play an important role in this tactic. Example: the false landing preparations used by the Allies during the D-Day landings to convince the Germans that they would land at Pas-de-Calais. Infiltration behind the enemy. This tactic aims to weaken the enemy from within by sending small units behind enemy lines. These troops cut lines of communication, sabotage, and create confusion. Example: German stormtrooper units infiltrating behind Allied lines and attacking critical targets during World War I. Encirclement. Encirclement aims to completely surround the enemy and force him to surrender or be destroyed. This tactic immobilizes all enemy units by cutting off their escape routes. Example: in the Battle of Stalingrad, the Soviets surrounded the German 6th Army and forced it to surrender. Diversionary attack. A diversionary attack involves launching a conspicuous attack in another area to conceal the location of the main attack. This tactic diverts the enemy's attention from the main target. Example: in World War II, before the landings in Sicily, the Allies organized conspicuous attacks on the islands of Sardinia and Corsica. Sabotage. Sabotage aims to damage critical infrastructure in order to weaken the enemy's military or logistical capacity. Targets such as railways, bridges, ammunition dumps are the main targets of sabotage. Example: French resistance sabotage of German railway lines in Nazi-occupied France. Depth of operations. This tactic involves layering defenses in multiple layers, making it difficult for the enemy's attack to penetrate deeper. As the enemy crosses each line of defense, he becomes more and more worn down. Example: the Soviets stopping the German offensive at the Battle of Kursk by building defensive lines in depth. Mobile defense. Mobile defense aims to repel enemy attacks by using mobile units instead of fixed positions. This tactic is based on directing the enemy's attacks and luring them into weak positions. Example: Rommel's tactics against the British in North Africa were based on the rapid movement of German troops. Assassination. Assassination aims to demoralize the enemy and break the chain of command by targeting leaders or important figures who can change the course of the war. Example: there were many assassination attempts against Nazi leaders in World War II, the best known of which was Klaus von Stauffenberg's attempt to assassinate Hitler. Preparatory bombardment. Before an attack, heavy artillery fire is used to weaken and break enemy defenses. This demoralizes the enemy and destroys his positions. Example: at the Battle of the Somme, the British used heavy artillery fire on the German lines before the attack. Defense in depth. This tactic involves building defenses in layers rather than in a single line. As the enemy passes through each layer, he is worn down and his advance becomes more difficult. Example: the multi-layered defense system used by the Soviets in the defense of Moscow in World War II. Thank you for watching so far. If you enjoyed this content, please like this video and subscribe to my channel to be notified of our future videos.